All right, YouTube, welcome back to the channel. We got a special edition of hobby discussions. I wanted to do the Law and Order theme, but I would get sued if I included the dun dun. But it's thematically appropriate in this case. So it's kind of a special edition. So I've got Dan's Vintage Baseball, not Dan from Saugus. I understand. Calm down, don't throw things. Dan's still very good, but I have Dan here because he can kind of give a little bit of light to it. We were talking back and forth, so I'll give everybody a quick behind the curtain. Well, obviously, we were chatting a lot behind the scenes in text message threads and everything, discussing a lot of the elements of it. Obviously, the title and the thumbnail and everything that's going to include it here will give it all away. You know what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the podcast that James Beckett did with PRyan. We're going to talk about the implications of it, what he was talking about. And since Dan is actually the lawyer, he, as opposed to my hobby doctorate, he has a piece of paper that actually suggests that he's done it. Although, Dan, as I've stated before, if you can't write me a prescription, I don't consider you a real doctor, so I can call myself a hobby doctor. And that's what I've done. No more, no less.
Well, you know, I've never called myself a doctor, but my degree is actually called a Juris Doctor degree. So, hey,
you're Dr. Right Jason, if nothing else. You're Dr. Jason.
Right on the, it's right on the piece of paper that they gave me those many years ago.
Perfect. Yes. So what we're going to do is just to give everybody a heads up here. So what we'll do is Dan and I were briefly talking about this, and I was having a little bit of fun because obviously this is the same week as the expo, and I will start doing videos related to that starting tomorrow. So we're going to record this tonight and I'll get it up on the channel, but then we'll start that tomorrow. I actually already met up with some of the principals. I've met the Baubles and Ball cards and Mrs. Baubles in person. Eric is already 2 Guinness to the win. That is a true story. I will share more about that on Friday, I promise. I am 3 IPAs to the win, but I'm still coherent and I'm not hanging off chandeliers. So we're already doing great. We're already off to a tremendous start as it goes. So what I'm going to do tonight, though, is obviously I've included in the description, and I will include it in this video as well. I'll include a link in the description to the podcast episode. If for some reason you haven't already heard it, you're more than welcome to check it out so that you can hear it without our commentary. But we will actually play a little bit we will play pretty much a good chunk of it for you, if not all of it. But we'll actually discuss a couple of more intricate points on some of the specific details. Some things that maybe haven't been brought up, and maybe we can expand on those a little bit. So this will be in addition to what other people have already discussed and talked about. All right, so let's get into this here. And I'll do a little share screen. And like I said, everybody, links will be in the description to all of this, so you'll be able to check it out. You can listen to the whole thing, beginning, front to back, at any speed you like. You can include it on there. Alas, I didn't hit the like button, and I'm afraid I can't. I can't hit the like button. I'm sorry. I've done what I can. But we're going to still play it. So what we're going to do is I'll play it, and then Dan and I kind of go back and forth, and Dan can signal me as well if there's anything where we feel appropriate. But we're going to start off with the beginning, the preamble and some definitions and all that. We're going to start with that because we want to talk a little bit about that. I have sped it up slightly, so if you listen to it in real time, this is going to be 1.5 speed, so it is slightly sped up, so just bear that in mind. Here we go.
Beckett grading, Beckett authentication. I had a conversation with PRyan, about the circumstances of how he found himself in an awkward situation, thought to be shill bidding, which I think has different definitions to different people. And I thought, Patrick, let's start with your situation and then move toward some of the nuances of what shill bidding is and what it isn't, what's bad.
So I'm going to stop there because I feel that's a good spot because he's talking about nuances. He's talking about what's shill bidding and what isn't. So Dan, do you want to tell us a little bit about this piece?
Yeah, you can't parse shill bidding. You can't, and he'll get into it later with this concept of defensive shill bidding, but you can't parse shill bidding. And I pulled it up from the dictionary, and shill bidding is the illegal practice of a seller or seller's acquaintances placing bids on his or her goods in order to drive up the price. That is shill bidding. The reason for it, whatever you think is your justification for it, it's illegal. Whether you do it to meet a certain threshold of a price, to get up to comps, to help your friend out, however you want to do it, shilling is illegal. So let's be clear here. There's a very distinct definition of it. There's no parsing of it. There's no different versions of it. That's the definition. That's what it is, and it's illegal. So you can play if you want.
Sure. So real quick, I'll just add one more thing. Obviously, when I do my live streams and all that, and I had a little bit of fun, Dan was obviously participating in the last live stream I did. Obviously, I'm going to take a more fun kind of flippant approach, but we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go into it. It's not that I don't take it seriously, because I want to make sure I give this, because obviously a lot of the tone of a lot of stuff. So it's one of those things where I have the ability to talk about a serious topic within kind of a silly way, but we're still getting to the heart of the matter. We're still saying, if you actually listen to what is being said and stated, even my silly rules of the hobby that I talk about, I make it a very crude rule, but I make it a simple rule. And we did specifically emphasize that I said, thou shalt not bid on one's own shed. Kind of in the same vein of what Dan's talking about. There's no qualifiers to it. It's one simple sentence that ends in a period. And the reason for that is because as silly as that is, even though we're having fun, we're being very lighthearted about it, the concept is not difficult. As soon as you enter into it, and we'll dig into it deeper as we play a little bit more of this, as soon as you have interfered in it, your intention, your rationale, whatever you want to put into it, is irrelevant. You have altered the state at which it would have been had you not entered into the fray at all. You still altered the situation. You changed the dynamics. And I'll get into that a little bit more because there is a psychology part to auctions that we always downplay a little bit, but it is crucial to understanding the auction points because there is a psychology to it. There's a strategy. And as soon as you change certain dynamics of it, you change how people respond, you change their strategy, and you've interfered. You've actually put your hand on something that wouldn't have necessarily gone that way had you never put your hand on it at all, regardless of your reasons. And that's an important distinction. So let me hit play here and we'll continue.
What's worse and what's frankly legal in many cases. I thought about calling this Saving Private Ryan or Saving Patrick Ryan. But Patrick doesn't need saving. He's a very sharp guy. He's admitted he made a mistake. He bid on his own item, but there's more to the story. Thanks, Patrick, for sharing your story. And I hope people will have a better understanding of what is shill bidding and what it isn't. What we really need to be worried about is bad act.
Real quick, I want to stop here because this is preconditioning people. You've already downplayed it. You've already given us the thesis before we even had the discussion. You've already told us that it's not that serious, that he's not a bad actor, well, how about we have the conversation first? Let's establish the parameters. Let's establish the ground because this actually isn't, Dan, I'll play into your world a little bit. I wasn't a lawyer, but I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express once time. So the reality is though, we're not having a trial. You're not addressing the jury here. You shouldn't already be giving me the story before we even get into the evidence and the rest of it. You're already giving me the opening argument before we even started.
I'm considering what we know is coming. The concept that Patrick just made an innocent mistake is really offensive in context with where we're going about 5 or 6 minutes from now. So that's he just made an innocent mistake is really pretty offensive. But
sure.
That's just my opinion, but we'll get to it. We'll get to the why.
I just wanted to start with that because it's an important note because it's, again, and I always mention this, and I mentioned this to Dan when we were having the text message to it. I said, this is your podcast. This is your platform. It is your format. You get to choose, and I've told this to people multiple times in videos and live streams. When I do this, what's going on my channel, what you're going to see here, if you're watching this on YouTube, guess what? I get final edit. I get to choose exactly what it sounds like, what is said, who says what. If Dan says something I don't like and I remove it, I had control over that. So, and Dan will know that. But the point is that I have final say. So whoever is responsible, James Beckett, this is his baby. It is his. It doesn't matter if somebody else is editing it. He still gets final say on what gets said and what doesn't get said. And he's chosen to include this. This is critically important. Now we're going to hit play.
Actors. So here it is.
What happened was I sold this company called Acquire. It was the first time I ever had anything go to auction with them. And for these auctions that have extended bidding, I bid on so many things when the auction opens. And a lot of times I'm bidding on Heritage or Golden or Fanatics, and I get a notification saying, you're not eligible to bid on this because it's your item. In this case, I see that I bid on it and I go, oh my goodness, that was my card. And my bid went through. So I say to myself, I was like, worst case scenario, I can at least now track it this way because Acquire didn't even email me that my auctions were live. So the next morning I email them and say, hey guys, can you email me a list of all my listings? And they send me over the list and I see that Michael Jordan card and I pull it up and it was already $10,000 more than I bid. Look, I should have raised my hand and said, hey guys, I made a mistake. What do we do here? They probably would have said, don't worry about it. Now, the big mistake I made is I promoted the card, posting a screenshot showing that I was outbid. Now, what's so funny is some of the naysayers, they're yelling at other naysayers, calling them stupid because they're like, he didn't shill bid, because if he was shill bidding, he wouldn't have been so blatant about it. I mistakenly.
Let me pause there real quick. So going back to what we said a few minutes ago, the intention, it's the action, not the intention, not the, oh, you're stupid because you showed it and you gave it away. It's still the action. The action is the thing in this instance.
Well, that's if you believe what he's saying here, which
yeah.
He will himself prove that what he's saying here is completely fake. So we'll get to that later on. But the reality is that what he's saying here is like there's like 3 different versions of what he said all along. But this is again, in context with what's coming, offensive. And we'll see. We'll get to it.
Sounds good. Now, real quick as an aside, the original version of his explanation, the one that he did on his Instagram Live, was deleted from Instagram. Now, it would be unfortunate if someone was to check in the description and see an unlisted video that contains it in its entirety. I'm not saying that's there, but I'm saying it might be. And if it
We should
is, you can
also
listen to yourself.
this company that he used to consign for him is owned by some nefarious actor from old times in the hobby. So I can't remember his name.
I believe it's
Jason
Jesse
Craig or
Craig,
something?
formerly of PWCC.
Correct.
I believe so.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah.
See, Dan, see, the 3 IPAs strengthened me. They helped my memory. But yeah, I believe it is Jesse Craig, formerly of PWCC. Obviously, look, Google Jesse Craig, Google PWCC with Jesse Craig, and you will find some interesting items. We won't rehash the whole thing right now, but you're more than welcome to Google that on your own time, and you will find some. The hobby has this funny story that, again, it's a small world. So a lot of these characters find themselves coming up over and over again, and there will be name drops through this very same episode. There will be some interesting names that we'll talk about here in a moment. But again, that's a starting point. But remember, in this version of it, again, I'm not talking about wholesale changes, but I'm talking about slight modifications in the details, the sequencing, the intentions, the thoughts. The more we make these slight changes, then I'm like, so which version of it is it? That's always a question that I have to ask. So regardless, though, he's kind of putting the blame on the platform a little bit. That's very consistent with what he did in the past. We'll continue from here.
Bid on my own item, which is actually very different than shill bidding. And it was wrong, right?
It's wrong. There's morals and ethics, but legalities. And we encourage everybody to abide by the rules of the auction or even the rules of the intermediary consignment broker, which I've been in situations where I was helping a friend that there were actually 5 stages and I was number 3 in the chain. And so I'm talking to Rick Probstein, who's going to put the cards from my friend's deceased uncle. And he's working through me. And so I call up Rick and I say, look, I'm doing this for a friend of a friend, my good friend, but his brother-in-law passed away. He's got some great cards, not all great cards, but I've given some of these to you. Can I bid on those? Because at X price, I'd be a buyer. There's some decent things in there. And he said, you're not the owner of the cards.
So, I mean, never mind that Probstein comes up here. I don't want to talk about Probstein. He's not part of this. But essentially, Dr. Beckett just admitted to bidding on his friend's items for the purpose of driving the price up. That's shill bidding. That, unfortunately, is a crime. And so we'll get into who should be getting lawyers later on in this. But the whole, and this isn't even the Patrick Ryan situation. This is him going back and admitting to conspiring with Rick Probstein to bet on his, to bid on his friend's cards. So, yeah, very troubling.
Now I do want to make sure. I address this. So I want to make sure you heard what I heard was that he asked him. He didn't say whether he successfully did it, but he did inquire if he could. He did state specific, because we can rewind if we need to a couple of moments. What I heard, so I'll just, if you heard something different, feel free to tell me. But what I heard was that he asked him if he could bid on these, which again still is the point that we're saying you shouldn't. This shouldn't even be a discussion. This shouldn't be a question you should be asking. Yeah. This is not correct based on everything we just talked about at the very beginning. The fact that you're asking is still bad. So I'm just saying, based on that. So right now, did you hear him? So from what you were hearing, did you hear him? I heard that he asked. That's what I'm asking.
Okay, he asked. Well, let's play it and see where he goes with
exactly. No, that's right. I'm just taking it based on where we're at so far. We'll continue playing, but we'll go from there.
Okay.
His nieces and nephews. And he said, then it's going to eBay. eBay isn't going to catch it. Rick is saying, I understand. If you were the consigner of your own cards, then no, you shouldn't do that. Correct. Don't bid on it no matter what. Now, the issue that comes up for me that I do want to get out there is that my interest in these items was only in the case of reserve not met. Reserves, I had promised my friend, hey, you're going to get this. I'm giving it to Probstein. He gets good prices. You're not going to get way above market. Some will go below, some will go above, but you're not going to get clobbered. Okay. On a couple of them, because the description, it's looking bad. So that's why I'm calling Rick and saying, he said, no, you can bid because number one, I'm not the owner. And number two, this is still way below market. I'm not bidding it up. I'm saying at that price, I'm a buyer.
So now that's why I say I wanted to make sure we got the timing right.
Yeah.
So the first part of it was the ask. Now we've moved on to saying like, okay, now you can. And we're making the qualifiers.
Yeah. So he's essentially, I think I hear that Probstein said, yes, you can bid if it hasn't met a certain reserve. And we'll read from some interesting language in another case later on. But regardless of who you're trying to help and what price you're trying to get, if you put your foot on the gas, if you put a bid down and, you know, it's your friend's bid that you're trying to get the price up, that's shill bidding. That's illegal. You can't do that. Period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we'll talk about a second element of intention in a few minutes because, and this is important, here's your foreshadowing, your literary foreshadowing. If you're making a bid, the idea that, oh, I'll honor the bid if I win doesn't matter. You're still artificially enhancing the price point. You're in a situation where you're hoping that it positions the price and somebody else wins it, but you're okay with paying for it if you happen to win. That doesn't change it. And also, a very important piece, kind of separate from that, judging intentions is impossible. I can tell you what my intentions are until the cows come home. That you're not going to know for sure. There's no way for you to be able to judge my intentions. I can tell you, and you can believe me because maybe I have credibility with you. That doesn't mean that was actually my intention. It just means that's what I told you. And I think that's an important thing because that comes up in a lot of cases, and a lot of the conversation comes down to who you believe or don't believe based on whatever your personal relationship is. But then we're back to intention, which is irrelevant. It's the action.
It's irrelevant. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's already admitted that his intention was to get a price for his friends. He told them that he was going to be able to get a certain price. Probstein is good at getting prices or whatever he said. And the reality is that he put his foot on the gas pedal, and that's not permitted. And to say that Probstein told him, yes, he could, I don't know if that's true or not, but Probstein shouldn't be doing that either. So, there's a little thrown under the bus going on there too.
Sure. All right. So we're going to continue here.
And if you allowed me to have a reserve, it would be reserve not met, which is in effect putting in a bid for the consignor.
There's so many tangential issues. When I made this mistake, I tell the acquire guy, first, the acquire guys will do a better job of reminding people. So they better build technology. Here's the links to your auction. Reminder, do not bid on your own, just basic stuff. And I said, why don't you just tie my name to everything? And they're like, we would never do that. We need the anonymity because we don't want you to get poached. By the way, my post where I showed that I was outbid was live for 18 hours before anyone noticed. And I think they're like, there's no way someone would be that stupid, or my brand is very forthright. They in general don't love people promoting cards because they don't like the idea of the auction house knowing who has what. And they have that right to want to protect their customer list. So then obviously Talking Heads had a right to come after me because I did make a mistake. I did something wrong. What was also hard for me is I had no sense of guilt because I know my intentions.
Shill bidding.
So I'm going to pause real quick. We're back to intentions, but there's also one other piece here that I want to hit on. I want to make sure I touch on this. So what it comes down to, and if you folks notice, in contrast to a lot of the live here, I'm taking a more easy approach to this because I want to make sure we don't lose sight of it. We're going to drop the shtick here for a moment because right now the focus is on the matter at hand and these statements that are being given. One important piece here that I heard from that little segment that I just played is that he's talking about this mistake. He's still putting the onus on this platform to tell him. He's still putting this onus. He's saying basic things. And I'm like, and again, I'll go back to kind of the joke that is of the rules that I have of my channel. The reason why that rule exists is because it is so fundamentally basic. You shouldn't have to have it explained to you. I shouldn't have to tell you not to steal. That I didn't explicitly tell you not to do it doesn't mean that it's okay. That ignorance is not a defense here. And by the way, it's ignorance of the highest order because this is a pretty basic. You said it's basic. I agree it's basic. So why did I have to explain it to you explicitly?
There's a concept in the law that your credibility is important, and your credibility is determined by your prior statements in many respects, or also how believable what you're saying is. And so we're led to believe that this man doesn't know that a card for which he bid $10,000 on, which is now apparently $20,000 higher from his original bid, a essentially $20,000 or $30,000 card he doesn't know is what's the legal phrase? It stretches credulity. It's unbelievable. It has no credibility. So we'll get to the later on part. But to me, the concept that you don't know a $30,000 card is yours is a little troubling, right? And quite frankly, a little bit funny.
Sure. So we'll go from there. But again, I want you to keep in mind as we're going through this, the key here is we're commenting on what is said. We're not making conjecture based on things left field. We're not using rumor or innuendo. We're literally taking you at face value on your statements of what you said. And we're saying, like, we believe you or don't believe you. Like, this makes sense. This doesn't make sense. And that's what it comes down to. Because again, this has all been provided. I joked about the content gods. It's like they gave this one to us on a silver platter. We didn't have to there's no investigative reporting here, Dan. I didn't have to find the secret tapes.
Yeah.
These are the public tapes. So we're going to hit play and we're going to continue from here.
Is actually defined by intent.
Right.
And they have to assume your intent or give you a negative association based on not acquire, but based on the legacy or predecessor of acquire, that people ought to be innocent until proven guilty.
Some good dialogue has come up. Like there are auction houses in Canada where you're allowed to bid on your own item. There's auction houses in Arizona where there's hidden reserves. These are things that a lot of people didn't know. And so a lot of people, wait a second, what he did, firstly, isn't apropos in many communities in respect that what I did wasn't what it looked like.
It's clearly not illegal. It may not even be unethical in the sense there's no attempt to manipulate. The problem is when they don't even pay.
All right, so we're back to intent. So real quick, intent tends to be a reoccurring theme in this conversation, and you'll hear it a couple more times. We'll go back to what we said at the beginning. The intent here is irrelevant. It's the action. It's what you actually did. It's because I cannot judge your intent. You can tell me what your intent is, but I don't know. So that doesn't help me.
It also completely dismisses the concept that there's an effect, that this artificial bid is affecting the auction in several different ways. One, it's creating a new high. It's creating, probably in the algorithm, some sort of, bumping it to the top kind of thing. And the other thing is that he's essentially saying, and he'll completely contradict this later, that his bid was just an innocent bid on his own card, which isn't really a thing. You bid on your own card, you've shilled, story's over. Intent, as we've discovered and we've talked about, is really not relevant in this scenario. But again, they're going to rely on that, and then they're going to blow it out of the water 5 minutes from now or less.
Mm-hmm. Now, real quick, can I throw one thing in here? Because you participated in different types of auctions. For myself, a lot of the auctions I'll deal with tend to be eBay, tend to be, Fanatics Collect, very straightforward ones. But you've dealt with different auction houses, different types, different formats, some with different rules and all that. Here's my question, though. Go ahead. All I was going to say was, so this is an important piece that I don't want to lose sight of because of this specific snippet that we're talking about. You talked about a moment ago how the moment you place a bid, I talked earlier about potentially changing dynamics. And the reason I'm asking you about these other auction houses, when you're bidding and it looks like there's a lot of activity on it, and you have in your mind, okay, I want this item, I'm willing to pay whatever the price is that I think is appropriate for it, then the activity on it may or may not affect what I think about. If I'm seeing a ton of activity and it's bumping up quickly, it may give me one idea in my head based on what I'm going to do strategically versus a situation where it stays pretty stagnant, it moves slowly. As soon as I change one variable, there is an element of what people are looking at. So the point is that, I bid here, but the final price was up here, so therefore it was irrelevant. Not necessarily. The moment you change one variable that wasn't there before, you might change the perception of how somebody else is looking at the exact same item.
And you essentially also have a ripple effect for the other items in the auction, because now you've got somebody who might have wanted to be in that, has decided not to be in that, so they're in another card. And that affects that card, and that affects another card. So there is a ripple effect when you artificially inflate the price or the bidding on any situation. But you did ask, and I think it's a good question. My auction house involvement is pretty widespread. I go from smaller houses that you probably heard of them, but they're not that well known, to the larger ones. I mean, I bid in REA virtually every time they have an auction, CIA auctions and Love of the Game auctions. And there was a video done, I don't know, maybe a year ago by Bluejacket 66, Dave Berg. Mm-hmm. And what he did is he went through all the fine print of all the different major auction houses and basically said, this is what they're doing behind your back. Some of these people have hidden reserves, and the auction house permits the auction house to bid on a card to bump it up, or sets a hidden reserve, and people who work for the auction house can do it. So Heritage has problematic terms in that regard. Not surprisingly, so does Golden. And as soon as I saw Dave Berg's video, I no longer bid on Golden or Heritage. The three auction houses that I do bid in, which are CIA, Love of the Game, and REA, all have pretty strict anti-shilling rules. I went through them all this morning. And actually, CIA is the one that says if we catch you shilling, you're going to be banned from the platform. The other two don't say that, but I think that would be something that would be somewhat implied. And I would like, when we get to the end of this video, I'm going to say something about what I think auction houses should do with regard to PRyan and Dr. Beckett, who've essentially admitted to being shillers here. So But that's essentially the answer to your question. I do a lot of auction activity, a lot of different auction houses, big, small, medium, and it's all affected by the types of bids you get. And so essentially when you come in with an artificial bid, you're affecting the entire auction.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I said I wanted to make sure that we didn't go too far without mentioning that. I think it's the idea that you're thinking because it's a small thing, it doesn't have the no, it's a ripple effect. As soon as it's throwing the penny into the pond and then the ripples are starting to move out, and you don't know exactly what else that alters. Because as soon as you start bidding on certain things, again, it doesn't have to be the top bid, and 5 people can bid after you. But those 5 people all saw the same piece of information. You're providing a piece of information. When you bid here, bid early, bid in the mid portion, mid towards the later portion of it, you're all altering each person. If they decide they want this thing, they're looking at how many bids. They're looking at how frequency of bids. They're looking at how high the bids are going. Is it the bare minimum? Is it this higher number? All of it plays into the decision making of each individual actor. And as soon as you start interfering in that, you have altered something. Even if you're not the high bidder, even if you're not the 4th highest bidder, you still did something that may have changed the course of this had you never gotten involved. And I think that's critically important. Okay, so here we go. We're going to play.
They'll bid it up. If they win, they don't pay. And then they've established a comp in some kind of bizarre way. But they're in a situation where they're way above market. That's the manipulation. When you're, to me, defensive shilling as opposed to manipulative offensive shilling. Defensive shilling in the sense of bidding on your own stuff. It's not shilling if you intend to pay. You say, I'm going to buy it for that. I'm not bidding it up. I'm saying at that price, count me in. I'll buy it back.
A number of people came and say, my friends.
All right, let me pause. 6 of one, half dozen of the other. Yeah. All you're doing is rebranding. It's like you've told me nothing. Offensive and defensive in this case doesn't mean anything. It's just rebranding the same action through 2 different lenses.
Defensive, offensive shilling. I'm not sure how you get a comp if you don't pay. I think that's actually not true. There's no comp if there's no pay. Also, defensive shilling is described as essentially driving up the price to get to the price where you think it should be. This whole concept of a comp is an artificial idea that something is worth X amount of money. The reality is that something is only worth the amount of money that somebody is willing to pay for it in a fair auction, right? So you have plenty of auctions that are fair auctions on eBay where a card goes for significantly less than it should because nobody bid on it. Or somebody bid on it and 2 people bid on it and one guy didn't want to go that high. There's a lot of different ways that a card can go below comps. And if a card goes below comps, these guys seem to think that's the worst thing in the world. The reality is it's the market. It's what the market tells you that something is worth, not what artificial bidders are sending it up to a number that they think it should be at.
Yeah. Now, one other thing I'll add as well related to that, though, is also I'll add to kind of your statement from a moment ago. It's not only what someone's willing to pay for it, it's what someone is willing to pay for it in that moment.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
the same auction could run the day after, the day before, and maybe we get a different result depending on circumstances. I've been in situations where I've been interested in certain items, but something amazing came up directly across my desk. The opportunity came in. I purchased it. Well, guess what? The money that I might have allocated towards that, I would have been a player at that other thing, but now I'm out. Well, all it takes is a couple of key people being out on the specific thing, and the price goes at a different level than you're expecting. Because if you're one of the final people at the end, if you're going to be potentially the high bidder, if I remove a couple of those folks, the price alters it completely. And there's nothing wrong with the item. It's just timing was bad. You happen to hit on it when, hey, that person just bought something, and now they don't have the funds to throw towards this thing. Now it's changed.
Before you start playing, just if you can rewind like 10 seconds.
Sure.
Because I think we cut off the beginning of the worst part of this whole video.
All right, so I'm gonna move back. I moved it about 15 seconds or so, we're gonna hit play from here.
Shilling as opposed to manipulative offensive shilling. Defensive shilling in the sense of bidding on your own stuff. It's not shilling if you intend to pay. You say, I'm going to buy it for that. I'm not bidding it up. I'm saying at that price, count me in. I'll buy it back.
A number of people came and say, my friends, we bid on one another's items just to protect them because we're not going to let some other idiot get a really good deal. And
protection is below this implicit.
This is the quote that I've had conversations. People love this quote. It's for the people, Dan. It's for the people.
So we can go. Let me just say right now that Patrick Ryan saying that he and his friends bid on each other's auctions to drive the price up so that some person, some idiot, doesn't get a good deal is literally the definition of fraud. That's literally the definition of fraud. And we'll talk in a few seconds about we'll do the Wayne's World going back in time about 10 years. And we'll talk about something. But Patrick Ryan, in that moment on this video, on this podcast, just admitted to a federal crime, essentially admitting to playing with prices, shill bidding for the purpose of cheating someone else out of something. That's literally a wire fraud. And we'll get into that in a second. That's a federal crime. If I were Patrick Ryan right now, I would go get a lawyer, because what you've just done is admit to a federal offense. Whether the feds go and start investigating or whatever, it's possible. Probably not, because these guys seem to get away with this stuff a lot. But the reality is that that's a federal crime, what he just admitted to. And we'll read. Let me. Can you pull up the Mastro thing?
Yeah, I've got it here. So I'm gonna bring it on the screen. Let me switch over to a different window. Bear with me a second. I'll switch from one to the other, and I'll share this. So Dan provided me this link, which I am actually familiar with this one. I have seen it before, but obviously there's some specific things we want to touch on. So I've got it right in front of me here. Bill Mastro, the infamous Bill Mastro, former interviewee of Probe Scene, former interviewee of other individuals that I've had some fun with on this channel. But go ahead, Dan. What do you want to talk about here?
I would just say that I would hope you would put a link to this in the description of this video.
Yeah, I'll
and people should read it, because there's some funny stuff in here about him not only trimming the Wagner card once, but he actually trimmed it twice, which I found to be pretty funny. But the part that's relevant here is that it says, and I'll read two different paragraphs. It says, the owner and chief executive officer of Mastro Auctions, William Mastro, and several colleagues placed fake bids to drive up the prices of various listings known as shill bidding. Mastro sold phony memorabilia, et cetera, et cetera. He pled guilty to one count of mail fraud, and he was sentenced to 20 months in jail. So let me go down a little bit. It's the third paragraph from the bottom. If you can get down to...
Sure.
I'll
scroll down here. Right here. It should be right there.
And Mastro admitted. Yeah. What it says, Mastro admitted in a plea agreement that the shill bidding scheme spanned from 2002 to 2009. Yeah, I'm sure these guys have been doing it plenty of times. The scam involves submitting phony bids to artificially drive up the price of online live auctions. Mastro admitted that he or one of several colleagues, i.e. his friends, would place shill bids as needed to inflate the price and to protect the interests of consigners and sellers at the expense of unwitting bidders. That's literally what it says.
Dan.
That's literally what his plea agreement said in a federal offense.
Dan, that's defensive shill bidding. It's defensive. They're playing defense. You don't understand.
What Patrick Ryan just said is essentially that paragraph, that he and his friends are shill bidding each other's auctions to protect themselves from having a card go to some idiot at a good price. So that's essentially exactly what Bill Mastro, is that his name? Bill Mastro pled guilty to as a federal offense of wire fraud almost exactly 10 years ago, and served 20 months in prison. So that, to me, is exactly what Ryan just admitted to on there. And, the thing that's you can take this off, but the thing that's most offensive to me with this, he committed a federal offense. Okay, yeah, hopefully he'll pay for it. But the whole concept that the people who are getting deals are idiots. Do you know who the idiots he's talking about are? That's me and my friends. So we're the idiots. And I was in the hobby back in the old days, the 80s and the 90s, and I knew it was dirty, and I knew a lot of these guys were carnival barkers, and a lot of these guys were just scam artists. And when I got back into the hobby, I guess I am kind of an idiot. When I got back into the hobby in 2018, I thought things had been kind of cleared up, and I knew about a lot of these Mastro things and some of that other stuff, but I thought the auction houses were on the up and up, and that these auctions were, sometimes maybe somebody shill bid their own auction, whatever. But this is literally organized corruption, that these guys are acting together. Besides the fact that they threw Probstein under the bus, Ryan is now throwing his friends under the bus. I don't know who those friends are, but they should also probably get lawyers. But this concept that a bunch of guys out there are shill bidding up auctions so that nobody can get a good deal is just the kind of corruption that I didn't expect was going to be in this. And this is a bit of a wake-up call, this admission by Ryan. It's a bit of a wake-up call for me and my friends who bid in these auctions, who we thought it was a fair game. We thought it was an even playing field, but it's not. And so my question to the auction houses is, what are they going to do about this? Is Patrick Ryan going to be banned from all these auction houses as well he should be? Is Dr. Beckett, who's talking about defensive shill bidding, going to be banned from these auction houses as he should be? Are they going to do any investigation? Are they going to look into his history of bidding, who bid with him on these other, who his friends are, all that stuff? It's a question of whether the auction houses are going to live up to what they say in their rules, which is that they're on the up and up. And are they going to do anything about this? That's my real question here. Whatever happens to Patrick Ryan and his federal offenses that he's committed is really, I don't care about it. What's going to happen to the hobby is more important to me. So that's where this statement really kind of just shocked me into thinking, he's in a way, he's right. By trusting the system, I am an idiot. And so in that sense, they took advantage of us and we paid the price. Literally, I paid more money for stuff than I should have probably in the long run, because the auction houses did get tricked by a bunch of these guys, or maybe they put up with it. So, because they're the ones that put the big cards in.
Sure. And I'll have a follow-up with you on, I'll have a follow-up with you on that. Kind of we'll talk about, because you posed one of the questions of what the consequences would be or should be or whatever. And I think it's a worthwhile discussion to have at the end. I want to get through the rest of it here, but we'll come back to a thought on that, because I do want to discuss it briefly at the tail end here. But bear with me. We'll flip back over to the rest of it, because believe it or not, guys, there's a lot of mileage there in 18 minutes. We've only touched a snippet. So aren't you glad that I sped it up a little bit? Imagine if we played it in real time. So I sped it up just a smidgen just to help us get through it a little quicker.
Can I just say one thing just before we start again? There is a part 2 to this. We were led to believe that part 2 would be a good explanation, and that part 2 isn't any better. But what happens in part 2, there's 2 things that we won't go into, but Patrick Ryan says that 90% of the people he's talked to support him. And I thought to myself, those 90% of the people are the people who are his friends, who they bid on each other's auctions. So those are the people who are supporting him. And then Dr. Beckett points out about 5 times in that part 2 about how wealthy he and Patrick Ryan are. And of course, the question becomes, how'd you get so much wealth? Because you cheated the system. And that's not there's nothing to be proud of being wealthy if how you got wealthy was shill bidding up auctions that you could make more money and your friends could make more money. So another rant over. You can play again.
Sure. For the record, though, I did enjoy that little snippet in part 2. So here's the thing: we won't break down part 2, but I will include it in the description for everybody's benefit. I would recommend to you, feel free to check it out. There is a little bit more of the same, but there's some fun snippets in there that are worthwhile. Maybe if I get some time after the expo, maybe I can break that down, but I don't have enough time for it. But I will say, though, kind of to Dan's point, when he says that, 90% of the people he spoke to, that's a loaded sample size. Like, just to be clear, every time I say horrible things about Eric, I check in with people, and there are people who think it's hilarious when I make fun of Eric. So 100% of them think that it's great when I say horrible things about him. 100%. So it's who you ask. That's what it really comes down to. We can get any number we want. All right. So real quick. So I'll go from here and we'll continue.
Reserve. That does not mess with comps. In fact, comps would be messed up if you didn't have that. I've actually put in something for another friend with PWCC a long time ago, and they were incorrectly listed, and I did not call them. And my concern for reputation, I didn't bid. And so they went for less than 20 cents on the dollar. Okay.
Wow.
Because they're inappropriately listed. Okay. And I didn't get a chance to change it until the last minute. And so I messed up for my friend. So my reputational damage is to my friend. They said, hey, you're going to get us good prices for this. You didn't. Okay. So I bit my lip, even though I would absolutely be a buyer at that. If there'd been a reserve, I wouldn't have had a problem. But so they want reserves.
I have less of a problem with the reserve if I know what the reserve is. But I will stay away from reserve auctions, because what are we really doing here? What do you think about the world of reserves? Is there a solution?
The workaround is that if an auction house says we don't do reserves under any circumstance, number one, the bigger ones, I don't think that's true, because you get a nice enough item, they're going to want it. Okay, so then the question is not, is there a reserve? And I don't even have a problem if it's hidden. I have a problem if it's unrealistic. And the auction houses are taking care of that by saying, hey, Patrick, we love your item. We think we can get big bucks for it, but we cannot accept a reserve that high. It'll be damage to our reputation. Somebody will bid it up. They think they're going to win. Oh, reserve not met.
And I will say, I do think auction houses generally do a good job if they don't want unrealistic reserves. Golden had one of the Wagners recently, and I was going after it pretty hard. And then the day before it ended, the $5 million reserve came out, and I was like, that seems like a nutty high reserve. But with a card like that, I understand Golden wanting to do that to get the business.
It's fresh. What also is fresh is the Baltimore News Ruth. Now, there may have been a $4 million reserve, but to take a $3 million haircut on a card, again, if this had been me or you helping a friend, consigning it, saying, hey, you're going to put it in the open auction. Hey, what about a reserve? Don't worry about a reserve. It's going to go up there. And then it goes like that. Reserves are back in the discussion now.
Yeah, they have to be.
Otherwise, it can't be a lawsuit because there's
Right.
no malfeasance or anything by the auction house to get $3 million less. But there's been an implicit guarantee that no Wagner has ever sold for less than the one before in the same shape. And this is not that Wagner, but it's the Babe Ruth that's even rarer than a Wagner.
Right. There's just so many complications with the whole ecosystem. And I do think people have learned a lot. And one of the content creators, Jeremy Lee, who does Sports Cards Live, he's in the process of documenting like all the T's and C's of every auction house.
Yeah.
And I can't wait for that to come out because I think a lot of collectors will be like, yeah, this is either more confusing or a little bit shadier than they maybe realized.
Okay, so I'm going to pause here.
Yeah.
And Dan, after I'm done, I want you to applaud me for my restraint in the background, because Dan knows this. And somewhere off in the distance, Eric is like, no, you'll be proud of me. You'll all be proud of me. I'm going to be very nice. I think it's very nice that Jeremy is going to look into this. It's very nice that he's going to potentially publish these findings. I don't see any negative to people being more informed about terms and conditions about auction houses. So I'll say that. There's nothing wrong with more information. That's good. But that would be merely a reference. In the long run, that's lovely, but it doesn't actually address it. To be blunt, who cares? That's lovely, but it's like most people aren't going to read it. Most people are going to pay attention to it. And even if they knew all the terms and conditions, it doesn't change the fact that some people are going to do things they shouldn't be doing. But knowing that the terms and conditions say they could, well, maybe it'll discourage you from bidding, but it won't change the fact that some people are still going to do it.
Well, what Jeremy is doing is essentially what Dave Berg did a year ago, which educated a bunch of us. And I would hope that you would link to the Bluejacket 66 video.
If I can find, I know what you're referring to because I do follow Dave's channel. If I can find the specific one, I will try to pull it up and I will try to include in the description.
Yeah, I'll see if I can find it for you also. And send you the link if it's not that hard because he's unfortunately doesn't make that many videos anymore.
And as I said, that's why I led off the top and I said there is nothing wrong with this. It's not a bad thing. I'm just making clear. It's good to have the reference. It's good to have the information, but I'm just saying ultimately it's irrelevant to the general discussion outside of it's good to have this info. Hopefully people read it. Hopefully it's helpful to them, but it's still not going to address the main issue at hand.
Whatever your relationship or not relationship with Jeremy, it's unimportant to what I'm about to bring up, which is the fact that Jeremy's infamous Joe Jackson card was previously owned by Patrick Ryan. Right. And Jeremy bid on that card in a bidding war live on YouTube. Mm-hmm. And I think that people have asked him the question, whether he thinks it was shill bid. I don't think he's answered the question because I don't think he wants to answer the question. Sure. I wouldn't want to answer the question, but in reality, I think there's a very, very strong possibility that either Patrick Ryan or one of his friends got into that bidding war with Jeremy and let him win. And that to me is disgraceful and also a federal crime.
Yeah, no, and here's the thing. Again, going back to what I said a moment ago, fair is fair, and I'm nothing if not fair. I agree with you. Regardless of who it is, if they have paid more than they should have because someone else put it in there, regardless of what I think about them, that is wrong. And just full stop, that is wrong. Because he should have been allowed to bid on it fairly with real bidders who were actually intending, with not people who are trying to prop up a price or do whatever. He should have been able to have it on the open market and pay what the real price is without these external factors like everybody else.
I personally, if I was a lawyer in that scenario, if I was to be hired to be a lawyer in that scenario, I would subpoena on behalf of Jeremy Lee was it Fanatics auction? I think it was Fanatics, right?
I think so. I believe it was.
Whatever auction house it was, I would be subpoenaing the records of that auction to determine who the bidders were. Because if the bidders, can be identified as people with a relationship with Patrick Ryan or Patrick Ryan himself, I would have a lawsuit, a serious lawsuit, and to to finish the ultimately to finish what would happen would be the Jeremy would get money back, be it from Fanatics or whoever it was that was bidding there. But I would want those records of bidding. And if Patrick Ryan decides, if me or someone else says something that offends him, and he decides to send a lawyer after us, and I would welcome that, because I am a lawyer and I know that what I'm saying right now is 100% protected because it's true. And I would be able to get through discovery in any kind of legal proceeding all of his bidding records. So I think the last thing that he wants to do is to start going after people who are saying things like he committed a federal crime, because in reality it's true, and because the discovery process would bring out just how deep he was into this, just how many times he and his friends bid on each other's cards.
Mm-hmm. And I'm not looking to get sued, so just
No.
so we're all on the same page.
I'm not looking to get sued either, but
all my statements are alleged.
It would be interesting. It would be very interesting.
No, I agree, but I'm just saying, for the sake of this conversation, all my statements are alleged. Alleged. Except for my insults on Eric. Those are all true. 100%. Like, I'll stand by them without a question. But no, I appreciate it. That's why I say I wanted to make sure we have this conversation. And even like I said, so hopefully you folks understand now the tone of this. Even in a situation where it's like, if folks follow my channel, they're like, oh, you act. No, it doesn't matter who it is. If you bid on something that was propped up unfairly, that is still wrong. Doesn't matter how I feel about the individual. Full stop, period, end of story. We keep that across the board. All right. So let me hit play here and continue.
Use a different word. Let's say it's more nuanced.
More nuanced.
Frankly, the whole thing of shilling is a pejorative word from the get-go. Okay. But all activity of bidding on your own items, or having reserves or not reserves, and the auctioneer putting a bid or some invisible thing that's not known, they're negative to somebody that wants to get a card for a lower price. They all have the effect of increasing the bids. People would be complaining if auctions were getting successively lower winning bids over time. We're in a bull market.
We are in a bull market. I sell a lot of random stuff. So that signed Jordan's not random. You're going to.
All right, let me pause for a second. I will rewind a couple of seconds. I promise, just so we don't lose that. What Beckett is saying here is irrelevant. What the market is what the market is. We are in a bull market. That is true, but not on everything across the board all the time in all circumstances in all instances. If something gets successively lower prices, that means there's a downward trend on the item. That is what is actually happening in that particular marketplace.
That's the way a market works, and a market without somebody with a foot on the gas pedal. If you're putting your hand on the
scale,
the scales, yeah, that's not the way the market works. And if it's going to be a lower price, that's because somebody doesn't want to pay the higher price. But what was the word that Patrick Ryan used about the Jordan card? Because remember, he said he wasn't sure it was his card. Now he's saying it's a special card or something, right?
Yeah, I'm rewinding a couple of seconds. That way we don't lose it. Yeah. But that's why I wanted to take a moment to pause on that, because I heard what Beckett said, but I'm saying that's irrelevant, because the market is the market. Sometimes stuff goes up, sometimes stuff goes down. And we already said a moment ago, I gave you a legitimate scenario where something that someone may have desire to purchase. We don't all have unlimited funds. We don't.
Yeah.
I joke about on the live stream that Eric has unlimited funds. That's why I keep increasing the like button rate. But in the real world, most people have a finite amount of funds available. This is a hobby. It shouldn't be your main thing that you're spending all your money on. So we've all got a finite hobby budget too. So if I find things, and I'm a collector of multiple things, and I say I've got $1,000, I'm just making up a number, and I spent $800 on this thing because I really want that thing. It's really cool. And this other item comes up that's $600. Well, I had $1,000, Dan. I've only got $200 left. Unless I'm willing to extend or use credit or do whatever, my budget is exhausted. I would have been a bidder at that $600 thing, but now I cannot be. Therefore, that may go for less than it should have. Maybe instead of $600, it goes for $400. I was willing to go to $600, but now I can't bid. Well, that's the market. That's the way this works. Fair is fair. That's the way it is.
Yep.
So that's important, because what he's saying there, I understand the concept, but I disagree fundamentally, because it is exactly against the spirit of an actual fair marketplace. All right, so here we go. I'm gonna hit play now.
That's not known, they're negative to somebody that wants to get a card for a lower price. They all have the effect of increasing the bids. People would be complaining if auctions were getting successively lower winning bids over time. We're in a bull market.
We are in a bull market. I sell a lot of random stuff. So that signed Jordan's not random. You're going to know what the value is within 10% range. Like
It's not
via
random.
Rip Rope on eBay, I'll sell stuff like random signed cards or random signed tickets. A lot of times they go pretty low. And I've always been okay with that, and where it's like a less known value. Let's just say it's like a signed Sammy Sosa ticket, where the ticket's worth $50, a Sosa signature is $100, the grading's $20. Like the raw cost of the item's $170, and it goes for $90. Now, I don't actually have a problem with that. Someone got a really good deal, and that might help their budget as a collector, or they've never owned a Sammy Sosa autograph, or they've never owned a signed ticket, and it broadens their collecting horizons. So I've taken hits, and like the number of times I get DMs from people being like, I can't believe I won this for this price. And I'm like, I'm happy. I'm glad you like it. So on the low end,
I'm very happy for his philanthropy, but ultimately that's still irrelevant to the conversation. You know, humble brag. It's like, hey guys, I can absorb, you know, $80 losses. It's not a big deal. It's fine. It's okay. I appreciate his philanthropy. That's still like irrelevant to this conversation. I have to have a little snark, Dan. I can't go to the entire episode without a little bit of snark in there. So I'll back it up a couple seconds. We'll continue.
or they've never owned a Sammy Sosa autograph, or they've never owned a signed ticket, and it broadens their collecting horizons. So I've taken hits, and like the number of times I get DMs from people being like, I can't believe I won this for this price. And I'm like, I'm happy. I'm glad you like it. So on the low end, where there's not really great comps, sometimes stuff falling through the cracks is a win-win. But what you're talking about is known items where there's a lot of documented transactions. It can be very disruptive if there's not some sort of floor.
Okay, you and I are talking, and we know each other, and we have some circumstantial background as well. But when you're talking about a $170 thing going for $90, you're being casual about it. But
Right.
you know, or a $20,000 bid on something, your perspective is not the perspective of every man. My
Well,
perspective is not the perspective of every man, and they freak out if you're making a bid on something that's equal to buying a car, or your Sammy Sosa thing.
Right.
You wouldn't think about putting a reserve on that, and nobody would do that. But that's a big purchase for majority of people that say they're in the hobby.
What I also learned is when a heritage auction opens up on the first day, because I want to make sure I'm eligible for extended, I might have $8 million worth of bids. And I can tell you, I would gladly win every item at that price. And then by the end of the auction, those values are at like 24 million, and I've won $150,000 worth of items. But I wanted to be in on the action just in case something on the day of. Look, by the way, this bothers people. I casually bid $20,000 on a Michael Jordan card. Guess what? I won the $500,000 signed Babe Ruth card in Heritage the same weekend. And so my perspective is skewed. So at least I got to learn from a lot of people. They've never.
So the other part of that I agree with is this perspective is skewed. That statement is accurate. Like from the entire segment of the conversation that we chopped up there, the statement that he's skewed is accurate. The idea that people are disturbed that he's bidding on $20,000 on something, you are correct. But part of the reason is you're right. The majority of people, and I've said this repeatedly, the majority of the hobby is operating where a couple of $100 purchase is a decision. It's something they have to. Dan, I am fortunate in. Not as fortunate as some, and more fortunate than a good chunk of people, where I can afford to spend a decent amount on my discretionary income on pieces of cardboard. And I'm okay with that. That's fine. I've made that decision. I've made that choice. But at the same time, the average person, even this expo that I'm about to go to, the card show that I'm going to go to up here, the average person that's going to come in is going to come in for a day. Maybe they're going to bring their kids, and their kids are going to go hang out a little bit. They're going to look around for stuff, and they might spend a couple $100 at most, if that. And they're going to go through these little boxes, and they're going to look through it. That's the rank and file collector. That's the real everyday collector. The majority of them are never going to spend hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars or whatever. Congratulations to him for being in the price bracket that he can do it, but it doesn't change the fact that the action is still wrong. At all price levels, it's still wrong.
Well, two things. One is, how many auctions is this guy in that he doesn't know that watching exists? You don't have to bid on everything that you want to watch. You have a watch list, you have a bid list. I don't bid on anything until the last day because I'm watching it all. And if the numbers are in my ballpark, I'm going to get involved at that point. I'm not going to get stuck with no bids before extended bidding. So he should be using the watch list. The other thing is this. I had a private conversation with some friends who were talking, and I started talking about how this was price manipulation. And somebody corrected me and said, you know what? No, it's market manipulation. Because if this card goes so higher, then this card is going to go higher. The market manipulation affects the entire market. And so to say that we're in a bull market now, I think a lot of people aren't so sure that we're in a bull market because a lot of these cards have been bid up with fake bids. That being as it may, those collectors who are at the expo, who are the salt of the earth people who are there because they love cards and they're just going to buy their $10 or $20 or whatever, love them. Those are those are the people who are the reason this hobby exists. And those people are even affected by this, because if the entire market is affected, it affects everything. And you know how in the 80s where everything just boomed, even your little, base cards were $20. And so like it's affected by it. And now this bear bull market is going to affect everybody. And so, if the people at the top are this dishonest, that's a problem for everyone, really.
Mm-hmm. No, I think it's completely fair. That's why I say that's the reason why I want to make sure we always take time. And in the course of
Yeah.
jokes and the fun that we can have with it, I always go out of my way. And this is a conversation I have with Eric on a regular basis. I never want to lose sight of where the average real collector, a lot of people underestimate, because what we're going to see is we're going to see the 5-figure sales, the 6-figure sales, the 7-figure sales. They get splashed for us. I'm not seeing that when I go to the card show every day. I don't see people plopping down large wads of cash all the time. Yes, I've
Well,
seen it, but it is not the norm. It is the exception.
they say that Jordan Kobe thing, the Shine Index thing, was just an outlier. But the reality is that every Jordan card and every Kobe card is literally going up now. And I have Card Ladder, and I know the prices of my cards. I know if one Willie Mays card goes for a high number in some random auction that I'm not even following, the next day all of my Willie Mays cards will have $1 or $2 added to them. So it affects even these very big auctions ultimately affect even the smaller stuff going down to $20 cards. So the reality is that these guys don't know how screwed up this is. They don't understand from their ivory tower and how wealthy they are. They don't understand that they're screwing everybody in the hobby.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good. All right, let me back up. I'll back up a couple of seconds, but then we'll continue from there. Let me go from here.
$20,000 on a Michael Jordan card. Guess what? I won the $500,000 signed Babe Ruth card in Heritage the same weekend. And so my perspective is skewed. So at least I got to learn from a lot of people. They've never bid in the Fanatics Premier. They've never bid in Heritage. And so they don't have the perspective of needing to have 100 items bid on.
You put in bids you intended to honor if you'd have been so lucky, and you were agnostic as to which ones you would win. Okay, I get that. There's also provisions in auctions that go into overtime that you can't participate in overtime unless you've placed a bid.
That's why I do
The
it.
bidding strategy is to make a low bid as early as possible that you're in. And I've done that with Huggins and Scott for sure, because I'm just going to get a placeholder in there. And it usually goes many bidding increments over that. The rational strategy is to bid early and low, and then you purchased an option for a very low price.
That's exactly.
All right, I'm going to pause since you're shaking your head. Do you want to chime in on this?
I understand placer bids, and people do placer bids, and it's just a different strategy than I have, but you don't have to. As long as you bid something before the extended bidding, or what he's calling overtime starts.
Exactly.
Then
that is the
you're
key. Yeah.
And it
Because
doesn't
even
have to
Fanatics
be on the first day or
collect.
the second. Yeah.
Yeah, even Fanatics collect. And I'm someone who so when Fanatics purchased PWCC and turned it into Fanatics Collect, in the early stages of that, they still had that rule where you needed to place a bid prior to extended bidding in order to be eligible to do the extended bidding. So remember
Right.
when I said a couple of minutes ago, I talked about different strategies depending on the situation. We don't get into game theory. We don't need to be that complex. Let's keep it simple. The reality is there's still a strategy. There's a human element. There's a little bit of a chess game going on, because if you've got multiple bidders, you're all trying to figure out how much to bid, when to do it, all this thing. Okay. When that was still the case, yes, you place a bid before extended bidding because you wanted to make sure that you were eligible to continue bidding once that flipped over. Then it becomes, okay, so when do you place that next bid if it's required? Then do you wait until the clock is just about to run out? That is a way. It extends it, but at the same time, it also forces that other person to have to keep paying attention, because sometimes you can catch somebody unawares. If it looks like, oh, nothing's happening, they take their eye off the ball for a minute, boom, you place that bid, and it sneaks in, and boom, you got the auction. There is a strategy to this.
Yep.
When they changed that rule and they said, oh, no, you can bid on extended bidding even if you didn't touch it, well, then it didn't matter anymore. Like at that point, you wait until the clock's into extended, you kind of watch it, you make your bid whenever, but the point is now you don't have to make the placer bid at all. So regardless, as long as with these other auctions though, where that's still required, then yes, placer bid, but you're right. You don't have to do it at the beginning. You could do it right at the tail end, at the very last moment, and then see where things are sitting as we're heading into extended bidding. Maybe it's already too high. Maybe you're not even interested at that point. Then you don't have to waste your time. You look at it and go, that's too high for me. Never mind.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah. So that's critical. Like, again, disagree with the statement. It's not necessary. It is a thing you can do, but it's not required.
Exactly what I try to do. And now with Golden, actually, maybe 6 months ago, I didn't know that they did this. You no longer have to have already bid to be eligible for extended.
I saw that and I didn't like it
I hate it.
because it allows you to get sniped by somebody that had no skin in the game.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like a fair game to me. On the other hand, if they're disclosing that's the way it is,
I don't bid early anymore than that.
Yeah.
They took out that incentive to bid early.
it's not just a bid early. It's in order to participate, you have to have a bid in. If
Yeah.
you bid early, I've been the 11th bidder early on some of the Huggins and Scott stuff. And I thought, I really would like to win this. I want to be there at the end. But wait a minute, there were 10 other guys that want to also do that. I'm thinking that's probably going to test my patience.
Yeah, I will buy anything for some price, literally, right? If it's a good enough deal, I'll buy anything. And I'm not just talking like cards, I'm talking art, watches. If someone's liquidating something and I've got the cash and I understand what that market is, I'm a customer for a lot of things. As the bidding progresses, what's nice is, okay, I get my bids in early. And then as I start getting outbid, that's when I start making decisions. Am I coming back in? With the Heritage auction on Friday night where I won the Babe Ruth, it was funny. I was like, if I win the Ruth, I can't also go after the Jordan debut ticket tomorrow night. I mean, I can, but you start thinking the pain you're going to face on Monday.
All right, pause. I want to touch
Yeah.
on that because he just said right there what I already talked about a few minutes ago. Remember when I said, if you win this thing, now you don't have the funds to allocate to this other thing. Well, maybe, Patrick, maybe somebody should make a bid in there and then bump up the price because now you're out. How are we going to get the price, Dan? How are we going to keep the bull market going?
Well, the other thing is he's trying to get deals. It's like, I thought the guys trying to get deals were idiots.
Yeah. So I want, that's why I wanted to pause again. I refuse to do an entire episode without some snark in there. And when you give me an opening, I have to take it. But the point is, yes, it contradicts itself two ways. You just laid out exactly the scenario that I just talked about, where it can result in a lower result because you had already allocated the funds elsewhere. Even
Yeah.
Patrick Ryan, in his great well, has a limit. There is a certain point at which, hey, I can't just keep throwing more money at the problem. By the way, that's perfectly fine. That's the case for almost everybody. But then that means the item might sell for less. That's okay. Sometimes that's how the market goes. It's timing as much as anything else, Dan. It's not just the people, it's the timing. It's the situation. All of it plays into it. All right, let me continue from here.
That's when I start making decisions. Am I coming back in? With the Heritage auction on Friday night where I won the Babe Ruth, it was funny. I was like, if I win the Ruth, I can't also go after the Jordan debut ticket tomorrow night. I mean, I can, but you start thinking the pain you're going to face on Monday when you get that email. So I do think early bidding is important because it's just a process of elimination. I would have taken it at $5,000, but now it's at 10. I'm out. I'm still interested. Let me up my max bid. And how you follow everything and how you track everything. Look, I actually don't love the process of using a consignor because I couldn't track this stuff within the Fanatics page. But I also like to know what I'm selling stuff for because that's also like mental capital for me to then.
And yet you did. But
Yeah.
you still did use a consignor. You don't love it, but you still did it. And then you bid on the thing that the consignor put in. But just making sure we emphasize this point.
Yep.
Track everything. Look, I actually don't love the process of using a consignor because I couldn't track this stuff within the Fanatics page. But I also like to know what I'm selling stuff for because that's also like mental capital for me to then spend on the. So just some mistakes were made.
What do they call it? Invisible comps. Any comps without context are a problem. Okay. Invisible comps. I heard people talking about that and complaining about that. But back in the day, that's all we had. That's all Beckett Baseball Card Monthly
Right.
had were invisible comps. They were no longer invisible when we went out and uncovered every rock that we could to figure out what, and we took into context, is this a knowledgeable, willing buyer and seller? Do they know what they're doing? And then one of the other things I did, just as a sports card insight, is I would take auction catalogs and I would look at the prices realized, especially with respect to doing the annual price guides for more obscure stuff. I'd take the big auction catalogs, I'd look at the prices realized, and I would see, here's a nice item. I think in the price guide, it probably would be $1,000, let's say. If it sold for $2,000, I might say, I have that card. I thought it was worth $1,000. If I get $2,000 for it, I'll sell it. On the other hand, if that same item went for $500, I'd say, you know, I'm a buyer at $500. I have one of those. I believe in the card. It's Roberto Clemente or whatever. I'm going to be a buyer the next time. It's too late. That's already done. Now, if it went for $1,000, I put on my price guide hat and I feel affirmed. You know what? Last year it was $1,000, or this year it's going to be $1,000. We're right on. The problem is now it's just bouncing around so much. Basically, if it does sell for $2,000, even though that was two, not idiots, but two people that just really wanted it really bad, as Chris Hoge says, comps ought to be based on the second high bidder. We actually did that back in the day, many times doing kind of a trimmed mean, where we'd eliminate the highest, eliminate the lowest, and really try to get an idea of this is what the card's really selling for.
Great point.
Okay, let me pause. This is kind of a minor detail in the grand scheme of things because obviously, you know, it's a little late to relitigate it. But remember, Beckett was the price guide guy, you know, back in the day. You've just said, and by the way, I understand the rationale for it. You know, we can, his doctorate is in statistics. So for people that don't realize, you know, means and, you know, this is important. The averages, this is all part of the statistics piece of it. So this is where he gets his doctor from. That's the key. But the point is, you are still making, what you just said is you were making judgment calls based on your evaluation of whether you felt that it was an appropriate result based. So basically, you just gave a scenario where you thought the thing should be 1,000. Scenario one, it sold for 500. Scenario two, it sold for 2,000. You kind of disagreed with both of those things, and you felt that your price guide said 1,000, even though both these theoretical sales were both on opposite ends of it. One was half that price and one was double that price, and we decided it was 1,000 just because. That's unfortunate. Like at the end of the day, but it is what it is. It's kind of a fun little trinket there at the end.
Yeah, it was the price guide, keyword guide. And so, he seems to feel that these days, you can't go under comps. Nothing can go under comps if I'm involved in it or my friends are involved in it. And like we said before, it's all about the market. And, one of the things I've said about the difference between the hobby in like 1978 to 88 or the early 90s and now is that we just have access to way more information. And not only, having, multiple price guides in your hand when you're looking at cards, but, the whole concept of grading, giving you, what's supposed to be, but all the problems of grading aside, it's an objective opinion of what a card should be graded at. So you no longer have to rely on some, carnival barker at a show putting an EX on a card that has a crease in it. It's like the information is way different from when Dr. Beckett was doing his price guide. And so it's not even relevant what he's thinking about with his, theoretical $1,000 Roberto Clemente card.
Mm-hmm. No, for sure. That's why I say I thought it was still worthwhile taking a second to kind of dissect that piece because it also kind of leads into the mentality, though. As he says, he carries it into today and kind of is thinking about it still a little baseline. So we're right at the tail end. We'll finish this off and then we'll talk about a couple of quick thoughts. So let me back up a couple seconds and we'll finish this one up.
We'd eliminate the highest, eliminate the lowest, and really try to get an idea of this is what the card's really selling for.
Great point.
See, we're literally right at the end. So it was an exaggeration to say we got there. Okay, so believe it or not, folks, that was an 18-minute thing that we broke up into a lot of chunks. There was a lot there. So I want to get some overall thoughts on this from you. But before I do, though, I want to kind of give a couple of thoughts myself. And I chatted with Dan back and forth, and we talked in text message. So I'll reiterate one piece. I'll say what I've said before. I respect what Dr. Beckett built. So I'm even going to call him Dr. Beckett this one time, just because I'm being nice. But I respect what he built in terms of a business, in terms of a brand, in terms of a media empire. Because as a businessman, he built a successful business. He built a brand that's so successful that it caused some people to be disappointed in what he said. If no one gave a crap and no one gave you any credibility, you cannot possibly be disappointed. The fact that people were disappointed is testament to that he had built a certain amount of hobby equity. I was kind of having a little fun because, a buddy of mine, friend of the channel, Simon 466 Cards, did a video where he talked about the Mount Rushmore of like the hobby of, people that were, almost universally loved in the hobby. And Beckett was one of his choices in the list. And I kind of poked a little bit of fun of him because even when he was doing it, I said, I don't think there's any universals because there's always a little bit, especially if you've been around long enough, live long enough, be the hero, die the hero, or live long enough to become the villain. And that happens a lot more than people would like to say, especially if you've been around long enough in the hobby. For better or worse, Dan, I have a problem. My problem is I've got some gray hairs, but I'm not as gray haired as some of my folks around me, but I never left the hobby. So I have been here for 35 consecutive years. So for me, you're not shocking me. I've been around too long, for better or worse. But the thing is, I prefaced it by saying I respect what he built. I respect the business. I respect the acumen on the business. But I never put the man on a pedestal because, Dan, up until a couple of years ago, I had never seen his face and I had never heard his voice. So he was like almost not a human being to me. And I don't really care about the human being per se. Some people do. And for obviously they've been able to cultivate a relationship to it. It means a lot to them. But to me, the magazine is the magazine. The books are the books. There is value to what they were able to produce. So I respect that. But I can't be disappointed in the human being because I don't know the human being. He's not a personal friend or personal associate of mine. That said, though, I also understand why it would be extremely disappointing for some folks that do hold him on a pedestal as a result of the successes and becoming synonymous with the hobby. When you say Beckett in this hobby, the name means something. So I understand the disappointment that some people would have from it. So that's why I want to make sure I emphasize that. But with that said, I can't act shocked with any of the revelations. I think the fact he laid out the specifics, I think the fact he gave examples and all this that was a little surprising. I'm not going to deny that. But the result is not something that shocks me. So I hand it over to you. Some thoughts that you might have.
Well, I have three emotions on this, one of which you've already touched on, which is disappointment.
Sure.
I don't know Dr. Beckett. We interacted once on a hobby hotline for, an hour.
Sure.
And but he's friends or friendly with a bunch of different people that I know. And
Sure.
the universal emotion here is disappointment. And it's disappointing because I think there were expectations. You may not have those expectations, but I think some people did put him on a pedestal. Obviously,
Sure.
This Mount Rushmore thing. It's there really shouldn't even be anybody on a hobby route. Mount Rushmore.
So that's my argument. For the record, that's my argument. I don't have anybody there just because it's like it doesn't make sense to me. I know too much. I've seen too much. Like,
I don't disagree with you. The other it's disappointment, and I think at some point he's going to have to realize that he's let people down with this defense of Patrick Ryan and admission of shill bidding himself.
Sure.
But also, there's a shame in this for me, because I'm supposed to be a smart guy. I'm supposed to be an experienced guy. I'm supposed to have somebody who has a lifetime of experience. I'm 62 years old. I've been in the hobby 3 different times for extended periods of time. And, I have a high education level. I have a high amount of experience in the law. And I feel like an idiot that this hobby tricked me again. It's like, it tricked me back when I was a kid. It tricked me again in the 80s with the junk wax, and it tricked me again. And I thought that a lot of these people were on the up and up. I thought that the auction houses were protecting us. I thought that all of these prices were real. And now I feel like I'm an idiot because I believe that. So a disappointment, shame, and the third one is worry. Because if these numbers are all inflated artificially, then this is, no pun intended, this hobby is a house of cards. And everything behind me is worth fucking pennies. Sorry. It's worth pennies.
We have a valid rating, Dan. I've already broken the seal on that. We're fine. Don't even worry about it. It's also after hours. It's fine.
Pennies on the dollar, and that scares me a little bit. So
Sure.
I'm disappointed, I'm shamed, and I'm worried. So those are my emotions. That's what I take out of this. What I'm not worried about is if I'm taking a strong position on what was said here, and people think that I'm defaming somebody, when in reality I'm telling the truth about them. I'm not scared of that. That's what I'm definitely not scared of. So I would welcome the opportunity to see all the bidding history of Patrick Ryan and his friends, because I think that there's a lot. I'm going to do another round of community service project recording this week, and one of our topics is going to be that shill bidding is way worse than any of us ever anticipated. And I'd really like to know how bad it is. And so that's what I come out of this with, is that it's way worse than any of us knew, but we want to know just how bad it is.
All right, I think it's fair. So let me kind of ask you a follow-up question, kind of semi-related, but also a little bit different. Let me take a little different perspective on this. I'm not going to be the person. So on the live stream that I did, kind of talking about this, I was very clear on this. And one of the things, though, that I said is, lest I be accused, I'm not the person in the glass house throwing stones. None of us are perfect. We're all human beings. We will make mistakes. What is important is, can we acknowledge them? Can we learn from them? And also, can we, if we did in fact make a mistake correctly, can we correctly identify it and just own up to it? Can you at least stand on your own 2 feet and own up to it? What I got out of that particular thing is we've got one individual who simply refuses to take responsibility, comes up with every excuse in the world. In reality, kind of changes his story a couple different times depending on what the situation is. And we have someone who decided to enable him, someone who has a platform, who is willing to enable him and willing to downplay it and play around it and offer various defenses, which is problematic for the reasons that you already outlined. Now, here's my follow-up on this. Going back to what I said about glass house and throwing stones. I can say my piece. And we just had this conversation. And I'm happy to have it. And I'm happy to offer a platform to have this conversation. And people can agree or disagree. Feel free to chime in the chat, or in the comment section. But there are other people in the space who have voices. And one of the things that I heard coming out of this is that different people have taken an approach to it. And by the way, they've condemned it. They've said, "Oh, that's disappointing. I don't agree with it," or whatever. And by the way, I'm not expecting people to come out with fire and brimstone and yelling at. No, I don't expect that. That's not reasonable. I think most people are like, I don't know how to approach this. But I kind of had a little bit of fun with Dan in the text message. I said it kind of tongue in cheek, but also truthfully, there is an element of truth to what I was saying, is that there are certain people who do also have a reputation in the space, a reputation in the hobby, and who are friends and associations with both people that we just played on that recording. And the question that I pose, it's an open-ended question that I asked to everyone and anyone, including Dan and anybody else who's listening. How many people are willing to stick their neck out and risk the dinner invite at the next Dallas Card Show? So the next time Jim Beckett has dinner, a hobby dinner, how many people that sit at that table and break bread are willing to say anything at all, anywhere outside of behind closed doors? And I'm not naming anybody because that's not my place. Just being clear about that. But I do pose the question because, and this is the cynical side of me, Dan, all that time in the hobby, I'm automatically on the cynical side because of a lot of stuff that I have seen. So I think a lot of them will be impressively silent. People who talk a lot will not have a whole heck of a lot to say other than the bare minimum. Yes, shill bidding is bad. Could you be a little more specific? Could you elaborate on that a little further? And I feel like we'll hear a lot of silence from some very loud people.
Yeah, no, I feel like, I consciously did this, and and people should know that I reached out to you to have this happen with my participation. You didn't reach out to me, and I reached out to you because I know that you do these things where you break down these these videos or audio or whatever, and talk intelligently about each aspect of it, which doesn't get done very often. And I wanted to participate in that because I have been living with this for several days at just how bad this is. And I the first day I saw it, somebody sent me the link and I listened to it and I couldn't believe it. And then I woke up the next morning feeling even more angry about it. And I'm still even angry about it. And I'm angry about it for the reasons that I said, in large part because it's given me a little bit of a wake up call that the hobby ain't what I hoped it would be. But also the concept that I don't have skin in the game. I don't have an invitation to Dr. Beckett's table at the Dallas Card Show or the National or whatever. I don't have really much to lose in terms of my position in the hobby. I have a channel and I'm a part of another channel, and that's about it. And I rarely ever talk controversial. I rarely ever say stuff like I said tonight, but I felt like today was one of the times when I really needed to step up. And, I am a criminal defense lawyer. I've been a criminal defense lawyer for 35 years. I know the criminal law inside and out, federal and state. And this is my opportunity to use my expertise to say just how bad this really is. And a lot of people aren't going to say it because, like you said, they're worried about their position in the hobby. But some people aren't going to say it because they don't really know how serious this is legally. And that's why I brought the Mastro thing up, is because it is really serious legally. But, I think that there are people who, I talked to you earlier about Neo's video, and his reaction to it, to me, was like the most honest reaction to the Patrick Ryan thing, where he says, me and my friends bid on auctions so that, some idiot doesn't get a deal. He was flabbergasted. And flabbergasted is a natural reaction for somebody who doesn't necessarily know. He's a data guy. He's not a law guy. But as a law guy, I'm more than flabbergasted. I'm offended, and I know how legally how significant that confession to a federal offense on a podcast was. So, yeah, I mean, I think I probably hurt my position in the hobby, but you know what? This is more important to me. What's more important to me is that this kind of dishonesty and this kind of corruption get called out and shown for what it really is, rather than, I get to be friends with people and have dinners at the National or whatever. So
No,
there you go.
I think that's fair, and I appreciate your candor, and I appreciate that you contributed towards offering that information from your expertise and everything. You know, honestly, not even a funny sign off. Like, no, we're gonna play it sincerely, but no, I appreciate it, and at the
Yeah.
same time, yes, hopefully there is some value to it. Hopefully, those of you that do watch it get something out of it. At the end of the day, I'll go back to my original position. Uh, I've seen this stuff come and go. I would like maybe for some folks to take this as an actual lesson. I would like that. It would be nice. I always joke that the hobby doesn't learn anything because they just keep teaching me that you don't learn. I'm hoping that maybe a couple of these things stick a little. It's okay it's okay for people to make mistakes. It's okay
So
for people to put. Go ahead.
wait, when this first broke, before the Beckett thing, but when the Patrick Ryan thing first broke, Dan
Yeah,
the Cardman did a video about this, as he normally does, because he's very up on these things. Big
for sure.
fan.
Yeah, yeah. Mhm.
And I made a comment on his video that has had a lot of interaction and a lot of likes, because I feel like it was a piece of advice that I know shill bidding was taking place, and I knew that it was something that I had to guard against. And my
Sure.
advice was to don't get into bidding wars. Know your limit. Know that there's a possibility that somebody is shilling this, and just do not allow yourselves to get into bidding wars, and step away when the card gets to a number that you are uncomfortable with. Don't make it a mano mano thing. Just step away. You're not going to get this card. You're not going to get this item. You're not going to win this auction, and that's it. If you can exercise some restraint, and you can place your limits and live by those limits, shill bidding is not going to win. But the problem is there are people out there who do get mano mano, on a Sunday night at 10 o'clock or whatever, or midnight or
Mhm.
whatever, and they're trying to win something. But you just got to let it go. And the less people play into the hands of the shill bidders, the less successful they're going to be, and the more we're going to be able to stop it. But that's pie in the sky, unfortunately. So it's my own lesson. Whether somebody else can get something out of it is another question.
I think that's fair, but it goes back to kind of the overarching lesson of the hobby. There's a lot of categories where a lot of people have a lot of complaints, and oftentimes valid ones. Sometimes I come off a little dismissive of them. I'm not, but I'm also looking at, you're the person who puts their finger in the electric outlet and then complains that you got electrocuted, but then you put your finger back in the outlet. So at a certain point, I can only help you so far. I can
Yep.
tell you it's not a good idea. Please don't do it, but I can't stop you, and no one else can. So you have to
Yep.
exercise a little bit of your free will is still intact, but you have to utilize a little bit of judgment, and that's why I'm saying hopefully these things are a lesson in this. One of the lessons is this goes on. It has gone on since time eternal. Wherever there's an edge to be gained, wherever there's money that can be arrived at, someone is trying to game the system. Someone is trying to do it. And I don't know if you ever heard me say this, Dan. I've used the analogy before because it's kind of a fun one, but also a valid one. I've said the hobby is very much like Vegas when the mob ran it. It's who you know. It's the guys in the backroom deals. But one piece of the analogy, Dan, that I also always include in it is that there are people who understand all these things that are happening, but are not interested in getting involved in the criminality of it, but then understand what landmines to avoid. They stay on the outside. They do their business honestly, so that if someday it does get cleaned up, they're okay because they can say truthfully, I did not do anything. Was I aware of it well enough to avoid the pitfalls? Yes. Your job is just to try to protect yourself. Kind of going back to what you were saying earlier. All you can do in some cases, you can't stop these people yourself, but you can try to protect yourself to the best of your ability. You can try to put yourself in the best possible position so that you can be okay. And what I'll kind of finish off on here, the last thought,
Mhm.
ironically, before I got the chance to talk to Dan, I was running a bit late because I was having dinner with some hobby friends and we're about to go and do a card show. And here's the thing, with all this known, and with all my understanding and knowledge of all these things, this is going to be funny. I'm going to spend the next several days hanging out with hobby buddies. We're going to have some drinks. We're going to have some food. There is still joy in the hobby.
Yeah.
But don't forget this other stuff exists too. Let's not pretend
I
it doesn't.
just came back from Shriners a few days ago. I spent 3 days up in Boston with hobby friends, having a great weekend. Probably overpaying for cards that the values are bumped up because of shills, but that's
Yeah.
the world.
I just wanted to offer the contrast though.
Yeah.
At the same
Yeah.
time that we can be
Yeah.
aware of these things, let us not be ignorant of what exists here. Let's not pretend it doesn't exist. But there is still enjoyment to be had here. There is still opportunity over the next several days. My next videos, believe it or not, are going to be focused on, hey, I hung out, I did these things, I might have found some cards, I threw mayonnaise at Eric. All these things are going to be part of the other videos that are going to come. There is a levity, there is still a light side to it, but we don't ignore reality. This video is reality. We're going to have a juxtaposition. Over the next several days, you're going to get the juxtaposition. You're going to see two opposite ends of the spectrum, but they're both real. Yep. That's why I say I want to make sure we still connect with the reality of it. And this stuff is where we get into the nitty gritty of it. Please understand it exists. Please learn some lesson from it. That's the best we can do. That's all I can ask. And maybe if you do, maybe we won't have to have this conversation again. Don't bid on your own stuff. It's not that complicated. I promise it's not that complex. It's really simple. Don't do it.
Yeah.
Sound good?
I want to appreciate the opportunity, and we'll see how this goes.
Indeed.
See what their reaction is.
Oh, we'll see. So feel free to chime off in the comments section. Feel free to engage us in conversation. Hopefully it was educational. You may disagree with our opinions, by all means. Feel free to do so, but let us know why. Don't just say you disagree. Say why. Give a little explanation. Otherwise, there will be more videos coming up in the channel. The live streams are usually going on. I'm going to try to have one in this weekend as usual. I had one earlier this week because I wanted to cover my bases. But usually, right around Friday or Saturday, I'll usually have one during the expo because it is a tradition. I'll have it. And to the best of my ability, I'll do so. Otherwise, by Sunday, Monday, I'll be back and we'll do the usual videos, the usual roundup of things, and we'll be back to making fun of Eric before you know it. So that's it for it. Thank you, Dan, for joining me. I will leave links in the description. You're going to get a link to the Bill Mastro thing, so we have that on there. You're going to get a link to the podcast in question that we were dissecting there. And there might be a little bonus link to a previous Instagram video that disappeared at some point. I don't know where it came from.
Yeah. Bluejacket 66 also, we'll try to get that one in there too.
We will try to get that one. Yeah, I got to go back in the archives and search for that one a little bit. But if I can find it, I will try to incorporate that one as well. So we're going to have a couple links for you. Feel free to check them out. They will be included as reference material for you so that you can check that out. All right. Thank you very much, Dan. So we're going to stop the recording and we'll catch you in the next one.